Slowest start ever? What do you reckon?
Quivering with anticipation.
I actually don't feel great. I think that's part of the problem.
You want to just do double up next week?
No,
you do
no,
sound,
no, no,
do
no,
sound
no.
down. You sound very down.
Don't be changing those dates. Okay. Right. 15th, 75. Okay, here we go. Oh, look, that barking's going to have to stop. Like, and the dog.
These stupid sirens would just not stop, though. It's unbelievable tonight. I don't know what's going on. It's a Sunday.
Sam have to be in the room while you're recording, or?
You know, did you not see the picture I just sent you?
It's a new edition. I mean, it's not been cleared by central management. It's just been a unilateral decision to bring somebody else into the recording room.
Okay, he's put his head down now, so...
Going to raise it with HR. Have you no treats now? Apart from a beer?
That's just getting more and more excited. So you just got to wait until these stupid sounds go by. No, I'm not joking. Like, seriously, there's been like an endless stream of sirens and trucks that are going by.
Maybe there's a fire. Oh, Julie, I'm recording a podcast, darling. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to episode 75, possibly featuring intermittent barking, which is something that will have to be raised with the HR department for future recordings. But in the meantime, James, before we get into any office admin, how are you this week, this fortnight, this day?
Doing well, very, very well. I've actually going solo bachelor tonight. My boy is away, so I've got a fridge full of Orion, a Lisa Stansfield CD, and a couple horror movies to dive into. So it's going to be a fun Sunday night here.
Horror movies. That makes
yes.
more sense. Although you did say bachelor night, classic bachelor night, beers and Lisa Stansfield.
Hey, don't
actually, the man,
come on.
The man I lived next door to in Dublin, who was a producer, in fact, produced her for a large part of her career in the 90s, and he travelled around with her lots, and she was a lovely woman. And also Snowboy, of course, who introduced me initially to Lincoln way back in the day in the late 90s in Club Phi just off of Aoyamadori. Also has worked closely with Lisa Stansfield, so there you go.
I'm shaking with jealousy right now. Jeez,
are you really?
Wow. Oh my God, Lisa Stansfield, come on. I mean, listen, I told you I've been doing this mammoth weeks-long cleanup of all my CDs, years overdue, and ended up finding a bunch of things from the late 80s and 90s, many of which were still ones to keep in the collection, and that was one of them. So I don't think I'd listened to her debut album for years and years, but yeah, put it on, great. A little bit of British soul, can't go wrong.
I feel like somewhere Carrie Coon's ears are twitching with jealousy. She's potentially got a rival.
Sorry, man. I'll just look. I'll stick to the Riverdance soundtrack and the Chieftains for you. Okay, is that better?
That's the spirit. Anyway, okay. So episode 75, and yeah. Thanks for asking me how I am, but it's all right. We'll move on. So last week we finished up in Elvin, a bit of an odyssey to get there, and I think at this point I was, predictably quite tired, but it felt relatively short distance actually to get back, because I was planning to stay in Sendai that night. So I got my lovely taxi driver, took me back to the station, and I managed to get the train, the local train, for about 30-40 minutes, I think, back into Sendai Station, which, suddenly feels like a metropolis compared to where I'd been. Full of school kids all coming home. One of those kind of trains that, has only got a couple of cars. And I got into Sendai and just could not miss the opportunity to go to a couple of places that we've actually talked about in previous episodes. So we'll not spend too long on them, but it's definitely worth revisiting them slightly, particularly one. So I dropped my bags off in a hotel around Sendai Station. and headed out to get some food. I think I had a burger, quite a nice burger, if I remember correctly. And then headed round to a place called Cabo, which actually is in the book, and is also the site of one of the most famous pictures, at least in my mind, of you during the course of the project, which is slumped on a staircase, asleep, after that long day that we'd had going around a lot of joints in northern Japan.
It was the Basie. It was the day we went to Basie.
It was a Basie day,
but the same day, the morning that I foolishly decided to go climb the mountain to see a shrine at 7 a.m. on my way before.
Of course,
Basie.
yes, that was the problem.
So you know what's? It's funny you mentioned that picture because it is a very popular one. But you have to set the scene a little more. That's funny because that the reason that I'm sort of sitting there on the steps, it looks like you're inside or sort of in a hallway of a building, but it's one of these buildings that you really only see in Japan, maybe in Bangkok, a couple of the older neighborhoods. It's sort of like an indoor-outdoor huge concrete structure where there's multiple entrances, very maze-like, and these long, narrow hallways of which there are just dozens and dozens of places to eat and drink. And that's where Cabo is sort of located, right across from that little stairwell. We were waiting there for, it seems like about an hour. It was probably less than that. It was just because we were so tired when we visited. But
well, you were asleep, so you probably lost track of time.
Me and Bernie Sanders. But it was, Cabo is amazing because it is one of these places that you'd think that if it was like a tapas bar or a standing bar, it could fit maybe just 10 to 12 people. But not only do they pack in 20 people, they put people outside as well to listen into live gigs that they do. I thought it was just an absolutely stunningly wonderful place.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it was a long day. You had inexplicably decided to climb a mountain. I think you'd stayed up the night before. No, we traveled to No, did we not travel together to Basie? Oh no, I met you, didn't I?
Yeah, because we went to Royce first, and we met a good friend of the show, Justin, who lives up in
but did
Tohoku.
we not travel up together? No,
no, we didn't. Yeah, we didn't. We met up there because you were maybe coming from a different direction or something. And I came up, and I met my buddy, and we climbed the mountain, and then we got to Ichinoseki around 11 a.m. already feeling it, and then we hit Royce and Basie.
And then you started drinking in Basie at like 11:30 in the morning, like so.
Yes, and then Ray Brown and all this. So I'm surprised I have any memory at all of Cabo by that point. But
yeah, it was quite a lot that day. In fairness,
it was good that we both had the chance to go back because this same trip where you're sort of like heading around to Tohoku by yourself, Elvin, getting back to to Sendai, that I had done previously the day that I went to Elvin, and I had gone up, but everything in reverse because Cabo was my last stop in Sendai, and today it's your first stop. But I'm assuming that on a weeknight you had a very different experience than I did because the second time I went back, it was a Friday. Again, it was like right after a gig where they're cleaning up. There were tons of people down the hallway, in and out of Cabo, very, very lively, and I had to wait about 20 minutes before I could talk to the lady that owns it. But since you're there on a weeknight and it's early, I'm assuming you were able to have some quiet time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a loyal listener to the podcast, you'll probably remember that episode, or at least us talking about it. Like you say, we hung around quite a long time, and eventually when we got in, I think I was probably a bit wrecked as well. I took, obviously, a couple of photos out in the corridor. I don't think I took any inside because there was still people like there after the gig, or the gig was over. And it was just kind of a mess. So I didn't actually photograph anything, which is kind of crazy because, there's, when we come on to the next place, actually it's kind of the reverse. But when I got to Cabo this time, happily, there was A, no live, and B, the owner was there, and she was by herself, and they just opened up. So I went in and fairly quickly sat at the bar and fairly quickly got talking to her, and I happened to have a copy of the Tokyo Jazz Joints book with me, so I kind of regaled her with this story of when we came the last time and blah blah blah, and she took a look through the book. I showed her the picture of Cabo. She was obviously really chuffed that Cabo had featured in it. And I have some nice photos on my phone, excuse me, which I'll post when the episode goes out, of her just sitting in Cabo looking through the book. And yeah, we had a great old chat. Funny enough, I've taken absolutely zero notes, but it's a pretty old joint, Cabo, I think. Like, it's sort of up with like somewhere like 50 odd years, I think. I may have written them down somewhere.
That's right. She told me that. And she also explained that, like, well, Philip, I have the notes from the time that we went, because the live gig that we were waiting to end was Honda Tamaya's trio. Honda, who I know here from here in Tokyo. And I was thinking, wow, that's a bit of a trek to go all the way up to Sendai to play. As lovely and intimate as Cabo is, I mean, it's very, very small. So if you're coming up from Tokyo to do a gig, that's, I mean, how much are you going to pull in? It's going to be a little bit costly. But what she had explained to me on my second trip was that, because they're a lot older, so many people who had grown up in the region, in the Tohoku region, and gone down to Tokyo for college. The story we've heard so many times, right? And then gone back to open their own kisses wherever around the country, right? But they also made a lot of those links with musicians. And so there is this sort of, like, for lack of a better word, Japanese jazz chitlin circuit of these tiny places that you wouldn't expect to have rather famous, successful Tokyo-based jazz musicians come to play a live show for only 15 or 20 people. But we've seen it in Sapporo, we've seen it in Kyushu, and definitely Cabo is one of those places. So that's why she was saying that, pretty much half of the gigs there are people who are pretty well known, based down here in the Tokyo area. And then the other live would be, locally based musicians, maybe not so famous nationally. So it's definitely a sort of a jazz hub. And I would think, I mean, because of the small, like, square shape of it, it doesn't feel like one of these, like, clubs where you come in and it's a little bit stiff. Everybody there's chatting to the artists. Everybody seems to know each other. And she, like you said, I mean, she talked to me for about half an hour, completely friendly. And unlike you, I don't walk around with a copy of the book to do the PR. Maybe I should start doing that and make more friends.
I mean, I was, in fairness, I had come from Ireland, like, so, I mean, I think it's not like I'm walking about the streets of Belfast with the thing pinned to my chest. I mean, although some people might argue that I do, but
based on last week's conversation, you're recognized by your voice. But what can you say?
That's a good point. Actually, I don't even need the book. I just get Shazammed.
No, but I think that's great that you were able to show it to her, and she, and she was so happy. I'm so thrilled to hear that. That's just great.
Yeah, it was just really cool to go back there, and actually the other great thing was I got to take some photographs this time too. So obviously I had my camera, and so I was able to re-photograph, or rather photograph for the first time in the inside, and it's sort of not really quite like I'd remembered. I don't know if they'd painted as well, but it just wasn't quite. I imagined it a little more basic and a little more sort of like bland or something, but it was actually, the lights and the colors were gorgeous. So I did re-photograph, and I mean, who knows if there's a second volume of the book. Cabo may be in there again. They also have that beautiful picture of Sonny Rollins on the door next to the umbrella stand as well, which sort of looks, whatever way it's put on, it kind of looks into the inside of Cabo as well. It's just such a small and sort of no frills place, but it's just a gorgeous space, like, to sit in. And I was, again, it's one of those moments where you just feel, it's really like, it just feels like a real privilege just to be able to sit there and chat and have that 30-40 minutes. She put on some piano stuff quite loud, and I've just written them. The only thing I've written in my notes is Hallelujah, I love her so I don't know if that was a reference to her playing the track or just a reference to the owner herself. I mean,
a little bit of Ray
I think
Charles,
it's her family, right? I think her father had run the place. Wasn't that what it was?
No. I think it's her husband. She said, I'm certainly, I had it in the notes. And remember, like I'm telling you, my second visit there was late in the night. So my memory's a little foggy, but I think it was her and her husband.
But her husband had taken it over from his family, I think. It was definitely a family concern, I think. Because I think she said his father had started it. Okay, like, and she had come in, basically, they've been running it for a long time, but she had come in as quite a young, so she, I think, had been a customer or whatever, but she'd been running it from quite young, which would sort of make sense in terms of the timeline, right?
If anybody's interested in their extremely 1992 graphic website, you can check it out. I'm just trying to see, because they've got a nice picture of this. They've got a nice picture of the sign, and usually these websites do at least tell you when it was open. But this is the most basic thing I've ever seen. It's basically just opening hours and then a very hard to read calendar of the live gigs.
Well, actually, she did give me something, and I don't know where it is. It'll be inside. I suspect it'll be somewhere inside a record sleeve. I don't think it was it was either a sticker or some sort of anniversary. So they had just had a 50th or a 60th anniversary party, like not that long ago. Anyway, I mean, if you're looking for like hard facts and really specific information, you've come to the wrong podcast, because it's like two old men in a nursing home just going, was it 50 or 60 years? And was it a sticker or a postcard?
Was that the night we drank shochu, or was I just on the Bushmills? I don't remember.
It's terrible. It's just terrible.
Look, it's been a long year, and we're both a little tired. So,
yeah, it really has.
And it actually matches, though, the feeling of both of us going there that time together, like we said, but also the separate trip, because this was the end of the day that I had started in Fukushima at Mingus, and then made my way up to Sendai in the bitter cold, and started out at the next joint that we're going to talk about. That was my first stop of the night. It was your second one, which is, I think, by all accounts, of everyone that I've sent there, and I've sent a lot of people to this next place, anybody that's gone up north to Japan who's a jazz head, I've sent there, and everyone has come back with the most glowing comments. So it's, for me, a top 10 kissa, which is Count, which is only literally one block down from Cabo. So I had gotten to Count that Friday night after several drinks at Mingus, and then on the Shinkansen up to Sendai. Again, like, you drop the bags at the hotel, it's about 9 o'clock. I'm like, okay, if I sprint over to Count, I've got a couple of hours. And when I went in there that night, Philip, that back in February of 23, I couldn't believe it, because I walked in and it was empty, maybe again because of the weather, except for two very young looking, like, college students who were sitting facing the speakers, completely silent, completely listening to the music. They didn't speak for an hour. And I was so impressed and happy to see some people half our age, more than half of our age now, right? Really digging into that Kissa experience. But that's the kind of place that Count is. We did talk about it on a very earlier episode, but it's a square room with the soft sort of like, leather chairs around, all facing this very loud Altec system. I mean, he plays the music loud at Count. And do you remember what my nickname is for the owner of Count? You must remember. Clearly you do not listen and remember my witty banter. He's the Buddha of Tohoku, because he is
I was going to say something to do with Buddhism.
He's the most stoic. He just sits behind the counter. He's not scowling at you. He's not intimidating in the least. He's just completely quiet, sits there with his eyes closed, chain smoking, and just when the record finishes, he changes the record. And occasionally somebody will be like, "Sumimasen," to call for a drink order, and he'll get up and do it. And then he'll just go right back to his seat with this very serene look on his face, light up another cigarette, pour some whiskey, and put on a record. I mean, absolutely wonderful retirement goals, if you ask me. But because of his very serene manner, we found it very difficult to talk to him. I don't think we actually had a full conversation with him when we went together. And I certainly didn't when I was alone.
This time, actually, well, yeah, you say that. I mean, this time it was kind of, I think there was a couple of other customers there. And actually, I think they knew about Tohoku Jazz Train. I think that's what it was. I mean, one of them, I was talking to, I think there was two people there. I think they were regulars, but one of them knew, when I mentioned about Tohoku Jazz Train, they knew what it was. And he sort of comes and goes, and he kind of like does join the conversation, but he doesn't necessarily speak. So he sort of floats back towards the bar and is kind of involved, but it tended to be through the customer. Because I remember I've got written here 3 things. One is 8,000 records. That was his estimate of how many he has. I've also got 10 p.m., which presumably means that they close at 10 p.m. And I know certainly that, I think particularly since COVID too, that his opening hours are definitely shorter than they used to be. And again, that's one of these symptoms of aging owners. But I had a sort of talking of aging owners or just aging. I had a bit of a senior moment, because I went in. And in my head, I also, again, talking about walking about with the book, wanted to share the book. And for some reason, in my head, there was a picture of Count in the book. And I sort of was flicking through it myself before showing it out, but before bringing it out to just double check. And then I realized, to my horror, and I was very glad that I hadn't made more of a fuss of it, that Count is not in the book. And the reason for that is because actually in the edit, and I know the numbers, there's 142 photographs that went to the publisher. And in that selection of photos, that final edit, there was a picture of, which you can see on the website, there's a picture of the Count entrance, which is really sort of atmospheric. It has the sign outside, then it has the lit up sign above the door, and the sort of the little kind of old kind of corridor. But actually, there's only 129 photos in the book, and one of the ones that didn't make that final cut was Count. And it was only sort of at that point, because for me, I'm so used to looking, like you're so in it and you're so close to the images that you kind of lose track of what's there and what's not. And I thought, oh, this would have been like absolutely mortifying if I'd sort of pulled out the book and said, oh, you should look at this. There's a picture of Count in here. And then, realized at that moment that there actually wasn't. And I was so confused. It was only afterwards I realized, okay, so that there was definitely that Count photo, but it actually didn't make the final cut. So
I'm wondering, Philip, because I think that, when we went to Count on that very long day that we talked about up north, it was a little crowded. And remember, we made some friends there, very, very lovely couple who, like us, spent their free time going around to jazz joints around the country. Yeah. So they were absolutely in love with us and our project. Remember, so we were talking with them a lot. We were sitting at the bar, but there were a lot of customers. So my inkling is that maybe you did get some pictures, but they maybe weren't ideal conditions, and you didn't get ones that just you thought captured the place so well. You mentioned the one outside, which is a beautiful one, and it is a lovely entrance. But I'm just guessing, it's very dark and it was crowded, so maybe that night you just, on our original trip, you just didn't get ones that you thought were good enough.
Yeah,
to make the final cut.
Really dark, and it is hard to shoot handheld. And I do have, there's a nice one of the speakers, but I just was never quite happy with the. So actually, again, happily. Always be working. I was able to also re-photograph Count too, especially after I'd explained and sort of told about the story about us being here previously and blah, blah, blah. So I did get some more photos. So hopefully, again, if there's a second book, Count will be featured there. But actually, another little tidbit that came out from the conversation with the owner and the customers was, of course, that Kelly, which we also went to, I think, on that epic day, closed last July. So this was in February this year. So this would have been July 2023. And Kelly always sticks in my mind because, first of all, it was very much like a little snack place. It had a little counter and then just this sort of slightly almost like cinematic little table where, in theory, 8 to 10 people could kind of sit around it, even if they didn't know each other, with just this one single lampshade above the table. And the reason I always remember that, because I think it was the 100th place that you and I had sort of been together as part of the Tokyo Jazz Joints project. And I remember posting a long time ago on Instagram with a very poor graphic about it being like the 100th joint. And so Kelly always sticks in my mind for that. But again, sadly, it's gone, So it's just a kind of a reminder. Talking of which, actually, just a slight aside, I was a couple of weeks ago in Paris at the wonderful Gallery Echo 119, who've been very supportive of the book in particular, and it's kind of a Japanese adjacent photo gallery, and they have a lot of Japanese photo books, and they've sold a lot of copies of Tokyo Jazz Joints, and Kiniko and her team there were wonderful. But I did a little talk and a little performance kind of thing, but Julie was sort of making fun of me afterwards, because as I was just going through a selection of photos that I had on a slide deck, and you're just telling a few small stories and stuff like this, what sort of started to emerge was this theme of death, basically. And I was showing, pictures of some of these, owners that we were lucky to meet and were just, delightful company. Like, for example, the owner of Stick. And it was kind of just it really hit home, because it was like 2 or 3 slides, and then I felt like I had to say, well, actually, sadly, this owner's passed away. And then she was kind of making fun of me because then I got to a story about Corner Pocket when we went, and we were forced to watch this weather report video for like 25 minutes before we could order a drink. But even that sort of upbeat, happy story, I then also had to finish with, and sadly, he has also passed away. And it just, and as I was doing it, I was like conscious. I'm just, I'm now just showing pictures of people and then saying that they're dead, but it just kind of brought home, I think, to me, even though we're aware of that, just, when you're using those images and you're looking at these people that you did meet and photograph, and now they're all gone. And like, it really drives home that sense of overall, despite all the positives that we talk about and some new places opening, that, overall, a lot of these owners are gradually giving it up and in many cases passing away. And that culture is gradually going to diminish over time, over the next 10 and 20 years, And so it was just a real stark reminder. And Kelly has sort of sparked that memory too, because, again, don't know what happened particularly with the owner of Kelly, but just the fact that that place is closed. And I'm always conscious when introducing the project and talking about the photos, just how many of the places now that we've been to and really treasure the experience of visiting are also gone, right?
Well, certainly... Yikes! We turned down a dark corner, but I mean,
yeah. Well, sorry, I did say.
It's fine. I mean, look, we've talked over the last 5 years on this podcast about that. A major reason that we started the project and a major reason we want to share it and get people to visit these places is exactly for that reason. Is that so many of them are at risk of closing due to age, due to illness. And due to a lack of, of a successor. So, having the opportunity at least, to talk about it. Yeah, there's always going to be that feeling of, what we call natsukashi in Japanese. It's sort of like nostalgic tinge of sadness about it. So, but, look, that's part of this journey as well. And it's a good segue into the next joint, because you moved on to a place in the daytime that unfortunately I was unable to get to. And Philip, I've been looking at. They have actually a really cool website. I don't know if you've even checked it out. But what can you tell us about the very curiously named Cafe Korpukur, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. And again, when you look on the map, if you actually look, there's a place called Jackie, which unfortunately I wasn't able to get to, and also then Elvin. And when you look again on the map, there's this triangle, and you think, oh, well, that's manageable. Now, had I been able to source a car, I could have probably done it. But I just wasn't able to. So in the end, I had to take a train out to Korpukor, and I had to take a taxi, I think, from the station.
Well, looking at the website, they've got a nice little flash video going here. I mean, it looks to be in the middle of some seriously deep countryside, as deep country as any of the places we've been to. So there's definitely no train or bus out there. I mean, it's facing a bunch of rice fields.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, it's kind of amazing. So it's very, very rural. And, if you've been to sort of mountain areas, or particularly where there's lakes and things in Japan, like, you'll recognize it. And there's this, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just Japanese, but there's a kind of a sort of wooden chalet type architecture that you often see. I suppose it's kind of adjacent to like skiing and things like that. It's that style of kind of building. And actually, Korpukor,
again, a very northern Japanese thing because of the cold, the double glazed windows, the slanted roof for the snow. I mean, it's not a house that you would ever see down in this part of the country.
Yeah. And so you get there, and there's kind of a long driveway up, and there's just and it was that time of year, so there's no leaves on the trees or anything like that. So everything's quite bare. There's this lake, it's pretty cold, and then there's just this signs as Jazz Cafe, and you go up this driveway to what looks like a house. You pass a couple of houses, and you come to this Korpukor, which is this brand new, beautiful building, and it has, I mean, it must be incredible in the summer, but it has this wooden balcony on the lake side of it. So you can sit out there and look out on the lake. But you go in, and it's one of those ones that there's a few of those places. I think Tournai La Page is another one where sometimes the names, whatever the name is, it never quite translates into katakana, and you're always like, what is the actual name? Like, what is the actual word? But anyway, I can sort of put that mystery to bed in a moment. But basically, you come in, and it's this beautiful kind of wooden, like varnished wood interior. I don't know, maybe pine would it be? I don't know, or cedar, but like it's just absolutely gorgeous. You go in, there's this huge space. On the left-hand side, there's a long wooden bar counter and behind that is thousands of CDs, a kitchen, and I would say that the counter's long enough to seat. There's only 3 chairs, but it's long enough to seat like 8 or 9 people. And then, it stretches out to the back wall where the speaker system is, JBL speakers, and there's a whole load of audio equipment off to the left, and then you go on around to the toilet, and then the main floor has 5 or 6 tables with chairs, and again another huge wall of CDs. And then on your right hand side there's also a drum kit, and then on your right hand side there's just all these windows that are looking out on this beautiful lakeside scene. And I mean, it's just astonishing kind of place, and I came in there and I was the only person.
Looking at the website, even just this is not something you see in everyday jazz keys. I mean, there's a massive grand piano in the picture.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But I think it's the opposite corner of the window you described, but the other side of those big JBL speakers. So the fact that you could fit that in there and they can have the live music without having to set up and take apart like you usually do in a tiny bar. They just leave it there, and when they have something on, I mean, it's interesting too, because you're saying that it had a lot of audio equipment. There's a page on the website that just says DIY audio, and
I can tell you about that, because actually once we got chatting, because the very familiar pattern where the owner's wife or the female owner comes over and sort of chats, and again probably slightly curious, like, why are you here, at this time of the morning, you're the only customer. And so I sort of explained what we were doing, and very quickly, of course, our friend Kusanose-san has already been there, and she brought over the Jazz Kisa magazines, and I said, yes, I've seen those, and we sort of chatted a bit more, and then this kind of piqued the interest of the male owner, and so he eventually came over for a chat, and actually he told me a lot about the audio. So what's really curious about this is that you see predominantly CDs, and like an enormous collection of CDs, but actually he took me through in some detail, and as we've said many times, we're not audiophiles by any means, but what he basically does is he does this by hand. So whatever the process is, he kind of takes the CD track and converts it to like a digital audio file. And because it's so laborious and so heavy, I think he only does like 2 tracks per CD. And then what he does with that is he puts that onto this digital system. So when you see the photographs on Instagram, you'll see that in between the speakers, there's like a huge TV screen. And what happens is, actually, when he plays something, it comes up what the album is. So there's a picture of the album. It has, the recording date. It has the sample rate, the bit depth. It has this whole comment about the album, and it tells you what track you're listening to from that album. And he does that for all the CDs, but whatever the process is for the audiophiles, it's so kind of long and laborious. Like he said, I simply couldn't do it for every CD.
This is
for every track on every
Philip.
CD.
This is incredible, because we've gone on and on. Of course, both of us not exactly audiophiles, so sometimes the what the owners are telling us goes over our head, especially in a foreign language. But I mean, we have seen places where they play mostly CDs, but the fact that he's got this huge sort of setup and interface, and again, looking at the website right now, he's actually has a page on it which says Master no Jisaku no Henreki, which is basically like the story of the master's own work building it, and there's a picture of all of the equipment that you just described up against the wall. Okay, I mean, we're talking multiple. We've got 8 or 9 different sort of amps and interfaces here.
He hand makes those. So this is the other thing, and they're called. He calls his brand, again, just linking with the theme that we've seen in other places, Smile Cat. So it's called Jazz Smile Cat, and so the amps, and again, I'll post a picture of these, but he also hand makes that equipment, and so it's just like he's a complete like audio nerd, you know, and it's all about that sound quality. And as you can imagine, the sound quality coming from those JBL speakers in that beautiful wooden space,
in that space
is
too. Yeah,
staggering.
Come on, and you know that he's got everything arranged, obviously, you know, for optimum sound quality. So I mean, everything about this this corporate car looks just beautiful. I mean, I'm itching to go there the next time I'm up in Tohoku. I don't think this was one that maybe was not on our list originally, or when did they open? I'm not seeing actually on the homepage when they opened.
I haven't written that down, but it's not particularly old, and there's some kind of connection. So the woman, the wife, I think, is from Ikebukuro, or they possibly both lived in Ikebukuro. And there was a cafe there, if I've got my notes correct, named after an Ainu legend who goes by the name of Korpakor. And that's why this place is called Korpakor. There's nothing to do with jazz. And actually, again, I'll post this photograph on Instagram if you're interested, but there's a little kind of wooden carving, the sort of one that you would quite often see somewhere like Hokkaido, like an Ainu carving of this legend.
That's, you know, that makes perfect sense, because that does not sound Japanese, Korpakor, right? It doesn't sound like a Japanese word. It reminds me a little bit of our man in Sarumanien in Nagasaki, which is also clearly doesn't sound Japanese, and it's, you know, named after B&B. You know, I like it. I mean, look, we all love our Mingus's and Miles cafes, but I think it's also really cool when you get something like this that doesn't seem to have any real connection to jazz, but it has some meaning to the owner, and a meaning that's a little bit esoteric. That there's no way that we could have looked this up and found out what it meant. You know what I mean? You would have had to have asked him. So I think that is just super, super cool. And from the map, it looks like it's in the countryside, but it's fairly close to the water as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lake. There's a lake right beside it. Yeah. Did you miss the bit about the lake?
I didn't scroll out. No. I'm looking at the. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Okay.
So yes. That was. I mean, and I had one final call to make that day, and it wasn't unfortunately in Jackie, but you know, I sat for a good while, had a good chat with them, and they were very complimentary about some of the photos. You know, I think I must have still had the book, so they must have asked to see it, and I showed it to them, and they were very I've got Subarashi written here, so they must have appreciated that. Then mysteriously I've got something which, you know, sounds like something that you might encounter on your solo bachelor night, but it just says chocolate fairy, and then there's a sort of a smiley face. So I don't really know what it means.
How dare you?
I feel like maybe she brought some chocolate before I left, or she gave me some chocolate to take away, and she must have made some comment along those lines or something.
Well, the menu for Cafe Corpacor seems to take quite a lot of pride in their sweet section. So
I had a lovely bit of cake.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably one of the selling points there. It does look very nice, those cakes. So,
but like,
wow, what a gorgeous place, man. Jesus.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. And the weird thing is, well, not weird, but actually, again, just sort of demonstrating just the kindness that we often come across. So she said, well, you know, what are you doing now? I said, well, like, I'm heading actually down to a place called Paragonian, which we've talked about on a previous episode, run by the inimitable Hiroshi, but like, which we'll come to in a moment, just briefly. But she said, well, look, hang on a minute. We'll get you a lift to the station. So just on the other side of there's a little car park for Corpacor. There's a quite an old style house, and a very old man and his wife were charged with taking me to the station. Now, as it turns out, they were also going to the station. So the owner ran over and she said, look, you know, this guy's here. Could you take him to the station, drop him off for this train? And they did. And what was amazing about it was this couple had lived in, of all places, Sangenjaya for 60 years.
Oh, what?
And having lived in Shimokizawa and worked on Neon Roku near Sangenjaya and spent a lot of time in Sangenjaya, I just thought it was just such a lovely connection. So we talked. And
next thing you know, you're gonna tell me that they were regulars at Uncle Tom. I mean, come on.
So we just talked. We talked the whole time. It was just one of those like really lovely experiences, and they dropped me off.
Things are just different in the countryside, I mean, it's just
absolutely.
We've had those experiences. People taking for giving you a ride out of their way, just bringing you extra food, gifts. I mean, it's just that warm welcome, and also again, the novelty factor of whoa, you came all the way out here again. Like on your precious vacation, you came to my cafe. I mean, that's just gorgeous. But Philip, it looks like Corpacur, to get from there to Paragonian does not look that easy. How did you come back?
Probably not. I don't really remember.
Do you remember?
Honest. Well,
because it was during the daytime, so
yeah, I think I took. Yeah, so they dropped me back on that. It's quite close to that Tohoku-sen, so they must have, or maybe it was the Tohoku Shinkansen line. I feel like it was I feel like there was a Shinkansen that I got on from there.
It's not far by distance, but if you're not going by car, the train looks like you'd have to go in a real like oval to get there. So that, you know what I mean? By car, it looks like it's 20,
I think it was
25 minutes away.
That Shinkansen line because that goes to Sendai, because I remember it being one of those stations, that like some of the Shinkan stations are big new stations, but there's like really nothing around them.
Iwanuma or one of these kinds of stations.
Yeah,
right.
I think I got that, and I went back to Sendai, and I had obviously got to get back to Tokyo that night, and I'm sometimes.
Yeah, because it was giddy that you were going to get to see Hiroshi, right? I mean, we weren't sure if you were. I remember it wasn't.
Well, I'd sort of planned because he very kindly bought some books from Care Verlag directly in Germany. Probably at some expense to himself, and so he wanted those books. Well, I had suggested maybe signing them and so on, and so I'd organized to go. So and you can listen, about what an incredible place Paragonian is and what a great guy he is on the relevant episode. But
episode number 55?
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I went to Paragonian and basically signed a few books, had a chat with him, about how things were going, had a nice coffee, really generous, welcoming man.
We should say, in case there are some people who listen out of sequence or people who've just joined us, Paragonian is in the town of Takajo, a little bit outside of Sendai, up in Tohoku region. And it is, if you look at their website, paragonian.jp, it's pretty clear what it is. It's a jazz art gallery, listening cafe, and wine bar, because our dear friend there, Hiroshi, comes out of the wine business for many, many years as an importer and an exporter. And he built this structure from scratch. Well, not personally. He had a company do it, but it's a brand new structure, an absolutely stunning looking building with one of the few Paragon sound systems in the country. So the sound in there is just, I wish that I had been able to stay for like a really long session. I again, like you, I was running to trains. I was only there for about an hour. The time that
it's not even that, right? I mean, he also has huge JBL speakers at the back, right? So you can take your pick. You can either turn and face the JBL speakers as you're using them, or you can turn the other direction and have the Paragon. I mean, it's like one of those buses that the seats flip.
I think he said to me, and if there's any of our listeners out there who are more audio knowledgeable than us, which would probably not be impossible.
Basically 99%.
Basically everyone. But no, I believe he had told me, and I've got to go back and check the notes, that it depends on what kind of record he's playing, because he also has, I mean, he's got thousands of jazz records there, but he also has a lot of European classical records that he plays during coffee time sometimes. And I seem to recall him saying that depending on the kind of record you're playing, you might want to switch from the Paragon to the JBL. For example, if it's like a vocal jazz album versus if it's a McCoy Tyner record or whatever. whatever. But I
Nice
don't
to have the
recall
option.
which way. Yeah. And these are nice problems to have. But Paragonian is so unique for all of those reasons. As you know, Philip, I'm not a wine drinker, which is unfortunate. But if you're a wine drinker, a jazz fan, an audio person, I think if you're a fan of architecture, and it's also an art gallery. He has a lot of different photographers and painters who put up things on the wall there. So there's so much going on there. I'm just really happy that he's still open because he was building it and getting everything set up, and then COVID hit, the absolute worst timing possible.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he took a financial hit.
Yeah, and it's not. You can see very clearly it's not it was not a cheap place to
not at all
to build, and even the furniture. And as you said, he has quite a few, prints and photographs up on walls and things like that, which are worth a fair bit of cash. So it's a great place. But also, even if you're not a wine drinker, this is the kind of he's one of these guys that I think is always hustling because he's been doing some consultancy for I think it was an American who's opened a brewery, brewery in Sendai. The tagline is Wisconsin-born, Sendai brewed, and it's Great Dane Brewing. I don't know if you remember me sending you a copy of it from the train, but Hiroshi dispatched me with a couple of lagers to taste, which again in Japan, happy days, you can sit on the train, have a nice snack and have a drink. And I've got a photograph. I've got a photograph for the Tokyo Shinkansen at 5:22. So that was kind of the time that I was getting back into Tokyo, or getting ready to get back into Tokyo. And I have to say, by that stage, I mean, I was really ready to get back to Tokyo and just chill for a night. I mean, it had been, I think, let me just see, where did we start all this? It was back in...
we started in Fukuoka, and
I've actually lost track, even like just in the course of this.
Remember we met down in Kyushu.
God, still going.
And then you split. I had to come home, right? So you did that. You woke up at 4:30, went to Miyazaki, and then you flew up. And obviously, I mean, you didn't do any sort of detoxing with jet lag. You just hit the ground. Remember, we met at the airport. We talked about that a few episodes.
Yeah, so
back.
I've got a photograph of us having ramen that first night. That was the 8th of February.
Exactly. Yes.
And then this Shinkansen trip back to Tokyo finally to go and stay with my good friend Tom was on the 15th of February. So I had basically flown directly to Tokyo, directly on to Fukuoka, and I'd just been going solidly for, at this point, for 7 days. So I was really dead. Like I think when I finally left Paragonian and I was like, right, back to Tokyo, it was like, as much as enjoyable as it all was, and as many great places I got to go and photograph, I was also like, okay, I just need to chill for a night or two. And it was
but some wonderful,
nice to get
wonderful new finds, and good to see some old friends as well up north. So I mean, it was a great trip.
Absolutely.
So, Philip, listen, before we head out, not to end on a downer, but I think I had to mention, it's not breaking news because we chatted about it offline, but I don't think we can end the podcast without mentioning that just one of the great ones passed away. Nakadara-san, the owner of Doug, and just what can you say? I mean, he is the doyen of Japanese jazz photography. He is the godfather of a lot of Japanese jazz kissa world. We've talked on many episodes how so many people who came from the regions of Japan to Tokyo, they learned about jazz. They learned about jazz, the jazz kissa world, from his shop in Shinjuku. And they went back and we talked about how we've met members of his sort of, network that he was a mentor to all around the country. From the north to the south. And so he left us at the age of 88. And unfortunately, I didn't see it until the actual morning of it. They had a very, very short window. It was just a sort of a 2-hour thing for the public to come. a little bit of a sort of a memorial. I believe that the funeral is, family only. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to it. But what can you say about Nakadara-san? We had a lovely evening with him together, Philip. I had met him previously, just briefly. I know his son a little bit, who still runs Doug. But he gave us some of his postcards of his great photographs. I have one of them up on my bedroom wall.
Yeah, I have one up actually at the moment. I'm looking at it right now. John Coltrane, Newport Jazz Festival, 1966.
Yeah. Yes, we had 2 copies of that. Exactly. So, I mean, you simply can't. I've been taking a social media break, but I think I tweeted this one out. You can't think about the history of jazz in Japan in the 20th century and not have him included, even though he wasn't a musician. I mean, he was a central figure. And so just, shout out to Nakadara-san, best to his family. I mean, look, he made it, he was 88. I believe he was almost 89. He was in pretty good health up until the end. And so, thank you, Nakadara-san. You were amazing. And, really, what can you say? We would not be doing this podcast probably without the work that he had done as a Kisa owner and a photographer, because of the impact that he had.
Absolutely, yeah, and we never did that episode, but we talked about the 3 Beatles. We talked about the owner of Jazz Street 52. We talked about Basie and the 3 of them being sort of college peers and in Shinjuku in the heyday, and then heading off and not Nakadara-san, but the other 2 heading off back to their own regions and opening these kind of flagship places, and certainly for me as a photographer too, particularly, obviously he was a very well-known, very accomplished jazz photographer. I'd photographed all the greats, and that was one of the reasons for including a picture of the book that he put together that has Art Blakey on the cover, who again is obviously so intimately connected to all this culture that we talk about and the impact that his tour in 61 had. And so it's a lovely way of all the kind of dots joining up. And actually, next month,
Philip, it's interesting because it's funny because it goes both ways too. Like I used to think about all the Japanese fans and the musicians and the cafe owners, and oh my God, they're heroes. They're American and European jazz heroes who they worship so much. And then looking at Nakadara's photographs the other day, and you see like these pictures of I remember one that stuck out was like a young Chick Corea in the old dig, just sitting there like looking at Hino. A young, long-haired Hino playing trumpet, right, in this tiny kisa. And the look on his face, he just looks so joyous, and you're like, oh my God, it actually was a reciprocal relationship. These American musicians came over and they loved these Japanese dudes and they loved these spaces, And so it wasn't just a question of like, oh, they're just imitating and worshiping them. These guys were interacting as almost equals. And so that's what really struck me looking at a lot of his pictures the other day.
Yeah, well, look, I'm doing a listening event in Belfast. If you're listening in real time next month, I'm going to do kind of dedicated to Doug special for that. So the tracks will be based around Doug, nice. And in some small part that'll obviously be a little tribute to what is incredible place. There's 2 or 3 photos of Doug in the book as well. The one that always sort of strikes me in particular is the staircase, going down. Because that's a very, it's something very characteristic of the Jazz Kisa experience, whether it's up or down, that sort of slightly too narrow, slightly too small if you've had a couple of drinks staircase. And
Smiles, Pepe.
So, it's brilliant, But anyway, just, I tell you what though, if we can just end on a slightly happier note.
Dude, you're gonna have to pause that. My doorbell's ringing, man. My fucking doorbell's ringing. Hold on.
Right, well, I'll just fill some empty time. You're listening to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast with Philip Arneal. James Catchpole is currently answering the door. And the barking that you hear is by Sam Catchpole, not known as the Jazz Dog, obviously, because that has previously a title been claimed as a title by my own dog, Penny, but I think Sam may be masquerading as the OK Jazz Dog until such times that Penny is no longer with us, after which he will then take on the moniker of Jazz Dog. It would appear from the lack of barking that James is now returning to the microphone and the package has been safely collected and placed in the Genkan for whomever has ordered it. James, do we have you back yet? No? Well, then I'll keep going. Oh, here he is. Yep.
Hello.
Good. So just been filling
Sorry
in there
about
while
that.
you're away.
Oh my God, that's just endless, man. It's like Wakana keeps getting these freaking Osebo, the Japanese winter gifts from all her customers. I mean, it's endless, endless.
Yeah.
That must be the 7th or 8th one this week, and every time they
Get
come, it's
yourself
like
get yourself a PO box.
just got out of the shower, recording a podcast. It's just like, could you guys stop delivering these boxes of tea and cookies? It's just, anyways. Sorry about that. Bad
Well,
timing.
just to finish on a slightly lighter note, which is I actually got an email from Catherine, who is in charge of German distribution at Carer. So she deals mostly with Germany, Austria, and I think Switzerland. And she got a very nice email from a colleague in publishing in Germany. Now, she doesn't know this woman, but she sent me on the email, which I used Google to translate into English, despite my A-level in German from 1992. And she basically, this woman had been, her email said she was in Posey in Shimokitazawa. And she had spotted the Tohoku Jazz Joints book, and she said other customers were enjoying it. Then she had a look at it, and she was absolutely blown away by the book. And so she had contacted Catherine and Carer to basically say, is there a way you could send me a copy before Christmas? Because actually my father loves jazz, but sadly he can no longer fly. And so he'll never be able to get to Japan to experience these places. So I'd love to get him a copy of the book, which I just thought was a lovely thing. But what's even more amazing for me is that obviously Posey was at the bottom of the street that I used to live on. And when we weren't there together in April, but I was there with Julie, and actually we were chatting to Misa-san's daughter, and the project came up, and obviously we're talking about knowing Nick and so on and so forth. And so I explained to her what Tohoku Jazz Joints was and what we were doing. And when we were there, she went on her phone and looked it up. And so obviously subsequently she purchased a copy of the book, which now sits in Posey. And obviously there's photographs of Posey in the book. And now this German woman has gone, seen that book, come back to Germany, and is now purchasing a copy off the publisher to give to her father, who loves coffee houses and loves jazz, but cannot visit Japan. I mean, you couldn't write it, right?
Incredible, especially because I'm so happy. Sam, please stop. He is just on fire today. What can I do with the doorbell ringing? Sorry, man. Look, it's just great to hear. I'm also, yes, about Posey, it's really good to know because she's taken it over, redone the website and everything, and it looks like that she's going to keep it running as it is, no changes. And I know in Shimokitazawa, it's not easy to do because it's so expensive,
Yeah. Right, we need to talk about this dog.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on today. Well, it's again, stupid sirens and now the doorbell. But
apologies to any
to
listener who's not an animal lover, but we will have this sorted for the next episode. Right.
Well, next episode, everyone will be home, so I'll be back in the usual studio. So
it sounded more sinister than I intended it to. It was like a Disney villain, but anyway. Well, look, listen, James. In the meantime, as the holidays rapidly approach, you look after yourself. We'll chat again in a couple of weeks' time, and have a good week.
Yeah, you bet, buddy. Have a great week, and listen, like I said, always ready to talk some jazz with you.
Cheers.
Sam is too.
Later.
Okay, take it easy, man. Bye-bye.